United with Christ. Meet local churches with open doors, serving throughout the Border Valley community and sharing the truth and hope of God's love and salvation. A presentation by KSCE Channel 38 Christian Television. And now, United with Christ.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us once again. We are here with United with Christ. Thank you to the TV station for giving me this opportunity again. My name is Maritza Hernandez. I have been here every Friday since May, and I am with Children's Protective Services, and I am the faith-based specialist. We do have a faith-based component to CPS, to Child Protective Services. And I have been doing this since August of 2015. This is, I love the program. I believe in it. I'm passionate about it. I've seen it work in other areas of Texas, and I want to make it successful here in El Paso as well. Now, I have been with the state for over 20 years, but this is the program I truly, truly love. And what does it consist of? It consists of connecting the faith community to the child welfare system. And with me today is a special, special guest. I invited him, and I'm so happy and so glad that he's here with me. We have a unique program. Please join us. He is both a pastor and a foster parent, and he has been a foster parent for CPS for a long, long time, and so he has unique experiences. He'll talk about that. And let me introduce you right now. Tell us about you, and that way you can start with prayer.
Well, let us pray. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for this day and the opportunities that you place before us. Help us to see them and to take advantage of them. And we thank you for the gift of life, and especially the gift of children. It's a special responsibility to take care of children, and we give you thanks for entrusting that to our care. We ask you to bless our time together and bless our ministry with children. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us, for coming in and for accepting my invitation. And so regarding the faith-based program, what does it consist of? It consists of connecting the child welfare system, as I stated, with the faith community. And so we know now that who knows their communities best? It is the faith community. Usually CPS is just a system of workers. Usually we clock out at 5 o'clock and we go home. And so who knows their communities best? It is the faith community. And so the state is committed to changing and changing the foster care system and going back to that mentality of, who used to take care of the orphans and the widows. 100 years ago, it was the church. And so CPS just came into existence maybe about 40 years ago. And so with me today is pastor and foster parent as well. And thank you so much for being here. Tell us about you.
Well, I'm Jeff St. Clair. I'm the pastor at New Hope Lutheran Church, and also a foster parent for primary medical needs babies. And so my wife and I, mostly my wife, take care of those. And right now in our home we have child 15 and 16 in our, and it's probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done, and it's also one of the most rewarding things we've done as a couple. And I'm blessed that my congregation is very generous with my time, and also very generous in that they more or less adopt these children themselves, and everyone takes an interest in them. And folks are always amazed when they come to the house because they see all these stuffed animals on the fireplace hearth, and they're going, well, that's because my congregation has gifted, and those go with the kids. And so it's that's what we primarily do, and we do infants because my wife is a baby whisperer, and but after they're about 5, not so much, but it's
How long have you been a foster parent?
We started in 2008.
2008, so for
Here
10
in
years.
this state, yes.
For
correct.
10 years you have been doing, you
Yes.
have been fostering. And mostly the children that come into your home are primary medical needs.
We have had one healthy child in all that time, and they vary. The kids we take care of vary. We've had several shaken babies. We've had one with severe brain damage. We've had a number of drug babies, some severe neglect children. We've had one that came in with a colostomy. She had been born with gastrocesis. That's when your insides are on the outside. And a very severe case of that. We've had one that's had a complete bilateral cleft palate and lip, which isn't that big of a medical problem, but in his case, it was causing him to have such severe eating problems that he was starving to death. And so we were able to, we've been able to help him and bring him along. And so it's been, we learn a lot. And from our perspective, we're foster parents, but we're just part of a team.
Correct.
And it's not.
That is so true.
Right, it's not something we do by ourselves. Not anything we could do by ourselves. Our team consists of our foster care agency, which is Upbring, and the support that they have, and they not just here locally, but also in Austin, where the headquarters are at. CPS, because there's some remarkable people at CPS in the various places beyond just the caseworkers themselves. And then with the various doctors and healthcare providers that we use, it's sometimes difficult to find good healthcare providers that truly take an interest in the children. And so once we find them, we stay with them. And because in the end, a lot of these kids have complex medical problems. And while different folks should have the grand picture of the child, they don't. And I've seen our PCP, I've seen some of the reports that get sent to him from a specialist, saw a child okay. You know, doesn't really help him much knowing what's going on.
Child growing.
Yes, and so we take it upon ourselves to be the expert on the totality of the child. And we have to become fierce advocates for them because a lot of times we encounter folks, these are just foster kids. They're kind of a refuse of society, I think some people think. And, you know, our position is, you know, they're God's children and they deserve all the care, respect, and dignity that any child of God deserves.
Correct.
And so
yes.
we are able to, through that, advocate as strongly as we can for the child, knowing in the end that the child is not ours. And never will be ours. We are not in this to adopt, and we have 5 of our own, and they're all grown, and thank heaven, last time I heard, they all have a paycheck. And but it's, you know, our task is that we welcome the child into our home. Often the child comes into our home with a diagnosis that they may not live. That there's a good chance this child may not make it. So we put that up on the shelf. We honor that. We understand it. We have agreed to it. And then we do everything we can to treat the child as normally and as incorporate as much as possible into it. And fortunately, we've been blessed that most of the children we've cared for have done incredibly well. We had one little girl with myotonic dystrophy. And when we brought her home from the hospital, you know, she laid in your hand. She laid there like a limp rag, you know, and they didn't think she was going to survive, much less ever be able to sit up or walk or talk. And she was with us the longest of any. She was with us almost a full 3 years. And when she left our house holding her CPS worker, Jennifer Martinez's hand. Walking out, and the satisfaction in that was just amazing.
Yes, it's so rewarding. It is so rewarding. I have been to your home. I've seen your home. It's equipped. You have special equipment there.
Yes.
And yes, how many children have you had at one point at your home?
The most we've ever had in our home were 3 at a time.
3 at a time.
3 at a time. And in large part, we could have more, but we have, when the children come in as primary medical needs children, they require an amazing amount of time and work to get them established with doctors and to get them there. We usually use early childhood intervention, ECI, to get the therapist on board and all those things. And it takes a while for the child to get into the pattern and for us to learn the child and the child to learn us. And so normally what happens is when the child becomes better, like our dear little girl with the dystrophy, when she's up and walking around, then we can bring in another one. And so normally we'll bring in a third if the first is
doing well.
already beginning to transition into their forever home, whether it's back with their family or to an adoptive home. So plus, while my congregation is generous with my time, they do expect me to show up once in a while. And so 3 is about the extent of it. Yes.
And so let's talk about the need for foster parents and the need for primary medical needs foster parents.
Sure.
Yes.
In our we live in a culture that talks about how important children are and how important family is. But my experience, both as foster parent and as pastor, is that we really don't mean it. It's just words, because we have there's lots of kids out there that need the love and care and support of a family, and yet folks say, oh no, I can't do that kind of thing, or I'm not going to do that. And so being a foster parent is probably, and I speak foster parenting overall in this case, is probably one of the hardest challenges you will ever have. And because, this, in our case, where babies come to us, they don't have, the memories and things, but they've also had trauma. And when the kids are older, they can remember their parents and all those things. And so, it's hard to welcome a child into your home. But that's what we're called on to do.
Amen. That is true.
We're not called on to do it if it's easy. We're called on to do it because this is a child of God who's in need of help. And especially at times like that, in those times of crises. And so, we do see it as a ministry, and I encourage folks to consider that as a ministry. As we've talked, one of the things folks say, well, don't you get attached to them? Well, yes, we love them dearly, and we cry when they leave. But we didn't, in our case, we never expected to keep them in the first place. They were here just for us to get them healthy enough to move on, or as healthy as possible. But, we also honor all the kids that we've had. If I can show you a picture.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
So we have, I guess if I turned it right side up, that would be helpful. We have our Hall of Fame, and each one of our kids has one of these pictures. It's a picture of the first day that we met them, or as soon as we can, and on their last day they were with us. And then there's one in the middle that is just something to remind us of who they are. And these hang in the nursery, and we'll actually use them with the other kids. These are all your brothers and sisters, so the family is big. And so, we have these there as a memory of who they were. And at the bottom is their name and 2 dates. And we had somebody, I think it was from CPS, who had stopped by one time and looking at these and saying, all these kids died here? No, that's the date they came and the date they left.
Thank you for the clarification.
So it's just our way of remembering and
yes. And so you have the date when they came
into our house,
and the date when they left.
That's correct. Yes. Just as a
and that is such a. And mention a little history about the baby here.
Oh, she was she had traumatic brain injury, compound skull fracture from abuse, and when she came to us, she was paralyzed on the one side, and her prognosis was not looking good because of the extent of her brain damage. But you know, you can see at the end, her paralysis. We by therapy and everything, little people's brains are amazing in their ability to recover. But it was a lot of work, a lot of therapy that goes into it, and we work with ECI because it's a home-based program, and so my wife does with someone like this little one, probably 6 hours of therapy a day. Now, not all at one stretch, but during the course of the day, so much of what happens is therapy. And you mentioned the equipment we have. Most of that has a purpose, a therapy purpose that helps kids. So look, we have this giant inchworm that must be, 12 inches around. Well, when you're trying to get a kid to push up, you can put them over there in their hands. It's the right size for a little one like this. So, there's, it's pretty, but it also serves a therapy purpose. And so we have that possibility and that ability to do that. And so, she fortunately, she was a great story. She went back with her mom. Her mom worked incredibly hard to fill her service plan, which CPS has for every parent and every child. You need to do these things, and she worked incredibly hard at it, and also spent time talking to me about things, because she would go to the parenting classes and other things, and she would learn things she didn't know, and she would come back and talk to me about it, and
that is
that
such a
good.
success story.
It is.
That's such
It's a
a
great
wonderful
story.
success story.
Yes.
Wow. Yes.
And so,
And that is a mandate that the state has, that CPS has, is to return the children home. And, it's a misconception that people have. Yes, CPS snatches kids at night and are never returned home. That is incorrect information. We are mandated to return the children home. And when it's not possible, then, we go to court. We present evidence, and it is up to the judge. And so when the judge terminates parental rights, then these children become legally free for adoption. In El Paso, at the moment, we have about 39 children waiting for adoption. They're legally free. Parental rights have been terminated. And we have 39 in El Paso, but we do have over 3,600 in the whole state of Texas waiting for adoption.
I was telling you before we started that just yesterday I was down at the courthouse on one of those amazing days when friends of ours were adopting their little girl. She was born with medical needs, and that her family couldn't handle, and was placed with an amazing couple. And we were down there celebrating with them as they were adopting their new little one and adding to their family. And it's a beautiful thing when you can see parents reunited or with their children, or in a case like this where that's not possible, where they find a loving family.
Yes.
And it's, and as we said, we aren't looking to adopt children. Have too many already. People say, why don't you adopt them? Well, because by the time they graduated from high school, folks would look up, man, your great-great-grandparents are here. They deserve to have parents that are younger.
Your grandparent is picking you up from school.
Right. But it's also that's not our calling. And for folks who are looking to foster adopt, it's it can be a challenge, as you know, but it's also we look at it as one step at a time. And just we do these things, and we want to help, and so it's an amazing thing. And there's a lot of love to be able to be shared, and these kids, whether they're this age or they're older, once they know they're safe, and once they know they're loved, they have an amazing amount of love to share, and
Yes,
it's a beautiful thing to see. I think the foster family that I was most impressed with were in their 80s, and they did grade school kids. And she was such a classy. They were kind of that old Spanish family kind of thing. Their son, when they walked in the house, kisses his mother's hand, those kind of things.
Okay.
But
Traditional,
but just such an amazing amazing rapport. They just did elementary school children, and because you can specialize, and we know families that only do teenage boys or only do teenage girls or only do elementary school. Like in our case, we only do babies. You can specialize depending on your skill set. Not everybody has the gift to handle everybody.
Yeah.
And I just liked being around them because they had such amazing skills working with these children that both Anita, my wife, and I were just in awe of them. So it's not a question of, you're too old. I imagine there's a time for that, but it's, even someone in their 80s could have these little people with them and take care of them and love them and help them become, all of that God wants them to be.
And that is very true as well. We hear stories of, well, I only want to work with children 0 to 5, and CPS is going to come into my home and drop off a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
No, that is, and
Doesn't work that
you
way.
have been a foster parent for 10 years. You're saying this right in front of the camera.
No, it doesn't work that way.
It does not work. No.
In fact, what in our case, what happens is we'll get a call usually or an email from our agency, which tells us that there's a child available, and would we consider taking the child? Now, in our case, since we're dealing with medical kids, that normally means the child's in the hospital. Not always, but normally. And so we have a division of labor at home. I do the stuff away from the house. Anita does the stuff at the house. So if the child's in the hospital, I'll get permission from CPS, because you have to go down to the hospital and meet the child and talk with the doctors and nurses that are caring for it to see if the child is something that we think we can take care of. Because there are times when we have said no because unfortunately in El Paso we don't have all the specialists here. There are certain specialties that we don't have, and in those cases it's best if the child goes to where those specialties are so they can be treated and not have to spend a bunch of time flying around and all that stuff. But I go down and meet them, and then I come home, and CPS has sent us a little case history of what they know, and God bless CPS, but sometimes the case history we get and the child we meet don't always line up because the case history was done a month or two earlier, and in that month or two, the child's condition has changed. That's why I want to meet them. Not blaming anybody at CPS for that,
No,
but
it's
just
true, but our information, the information that we receive is very
that's
limited.
right. Sometimes
as well.
very limited as well.
Yes.
And so we meet them. Then I go home, and Anita and I talk about it, and we look at the situation, and then make a decision about whether or not it's somebody we think we can take care of and somebody we can help. And then. And then normally there's some training at the hospital that we do, and then we plan the child. There's a timeline. Child will come to our house at a certain time, and sometimes we're able to bring them home. Sometimes the child has to be transported, depending again on their medical needs. And then part of our team is our durable medical equipment folks, and they bring all that stuff, and then all these other components begin to fit in, and so. And and folks know that we don't do children over 3, so don't call me with a 2.5-year-old.
Yes. Or with the 12-year-old, no.
Or a 12-year-old, that's right. Because we're not going to have enough time in those situations, and so. Generally speaking, the folks are very respectful of what we have said we're able to do, because it wouldn't help the child or help us to have.
Correct. It would be an injustice to the child.
Because we just have cribs at our house, and it'd be kind of hard to have a 12-year-old sleeping in a crib. So,
Correct.
Yeah.
True. And and I want to mention, out of the 39 children waiting for adoption in El Paso, most of them are teens. Most of them are teens. And so, these are the teens that are really waiting for a forever home. They're waiting for a permanent home for adoption. And, when people call CPS or call me, they say, I want a 2-year-old, or I want a 3-year-old. But the teens are also waiting. They're waiting for that adoption. Have you ever worked with teens?
Not as a foster parent, as a pastor, obviously.
As a pastor.
And then I've been a professional Christian most of my life, so I've done a lot of that, and it's and in fact, if it were just up to me, we'd do teenagers because I love teenagers. I find them to be incredibly fascinating and beautiful people to work with. But once again, like in our case, my wife has this special gift with babies. But to say, oh, we only want little ones, it depends. Are you trying to help children, or are you doing this for yourself? And of course, in any situation, there's some of both of that. But I would hope folks could feel called to say, these teenagers, man, how much can they contribute? What can they become? And this call to help people be all that God created them to be, and what a beautiful place to do that, because as you know, the rate of suicide and incarceration for kids that time out of foster care is incredibly high.
Yes.
And and that shouldn't be. These kids leaving foster care should leave or being adopted or know that they were so incredibly loved. And so, and teenagers are so grateful to have a home. And they're still going to be teenagers,
Yes.
that, let's be honest, they're still teenagers. But also they know what they have, where sometimes your own kid doesn't know that. They just assume that it's always going to be that way. So, it's, I'd encourage folks to think of it as a ministry. And if you're adopting teenagers, just think of how many kids you could have.
Yes,
and you don't have to change diapers. So.
That's so true. That's so true. Yes, and they do need the help. They can leave home, go to college. And, I have college kids, and so they call if they're in trouble. If they have, my daughter left for college and recently, and a year ago, and
you've forgotten when your kid went to college? Oh no!
A year ago, 2 years, and she was at the bookstore. She calls and she tells me I have a flat, and it's like, well, what can I do? 800 miles away, but these foster kids don't have that.
Right.
They don't have that support system. They don't have those parents where they can call and say, I'm in trouble. Or I need this.
Right.
They don't have that.
And I think that's one of the, the common gifts that every child should have. Somebody that can be a backup for them, to be there and understand that, they're gonna make some stupid decisions. We all do, and not just teenagers. and they need someone to help them and catch them. So.
We have a few seconds left, but I just do you want to say something before we wrap up?
No, it's been, as I said earlier, it's a difficult job and a very fulfilling job. And if you see it as a ministry, and I would encourage churches to consider it as a ministry. Your program is a ministry as well.
Yes, correct. Well, thank you so much for having us here. Thank you, Pastor.
Happy to.
God bless you all. Have a good weekend.